Hey Jane, good morning.
Guys,
How are you?
same as yesterday. It's becoming like deja vu, right?
Yes,
Zoom is becoming our bed and breakfast.
it's okay. It's all right.
Yeah.
Hey Jenny, good morning.
How are you feeling, Jenny?
Morning. Much better.
Oh,
Oh,
good.
Steroids.
good.
They put me on steroids, and like within a day, I'm feeling like way better.
Oh, good.
That's great.
Thanks for asking.
Good.
And Jane, I'll be talking to you tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have 3 days in a row.
Yep. Well, how many people sign up for this?
I think Maida said like 19.
Oh,
Now we are some of those 19, obviously.
right.
So I didn't recognize all of the names.
Patty, so where is this picture taking?
You know, I should have looked back to try and figure that out, Jane, but I think it was, I wanted to say it was on Mount Marcy, which is the highest peak in the Adirondacks, and it was about 20 below zero.
Oh, okay.
But I know it's near the top because I have my hood up. That's what I
Yeah.
do know. I did a bunch of winter hiking this is my first year doing winter hiking. So
I
it was
didn't know
actually,
that you were like pro and like real hardcore mountain climbing.
well, I mean, I'm not like, I had that pickaxe thing in my hand because sometimes you need that to get up the ice, but it's not true, like it's not as dangerous. Although, being out in 20 below is
Yeah, it's always
kind of nuts, but it was super, it's actually beautiful and really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't ever intend to get old, Jane.
Oh, good for you. That's how I feel now every day. Just getting old, getting lazy, finding excuses for not doing what I used to like to do.
Yeah, it is a challenge to stay busy for sure.
Maggie, are there more people in the waiting room? If not, we can, if you want to, we can go ahead and get started.
Yeah, there's no one in the waiting room right now.
Okay. All right. I see a number of folks are in.
I'll
So
just keep admitting as you go. So
okay, that'll be great. Patty, you ready to get started?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to EHE Community Connections again this morning or this afternoon, depending if you're calling in from somewhere east of me. Thanks for choosing to be here on a Saturday. I am Denise Robinson from the EHE Foundation. I became a part of the EHE community in 2018 when a friend of mine was diagnosed with EHE. And now I am a board member and the director of research for the foundation. And I'm thrilled to have Patty Cogswell here. She is the EHE Biobank coordinator. She's going to talk with you about biobanking, how EHE patients can power research forward. And some of you have seen Patty on one of our conferences probably lately. And if you can see my screen, if you can see the slides, there's a picture of Patty all bundled up in the snow. She's kind of crazy. She's a powerhouse in life. She's a powerhouse in cancer research. You should know that. She's a champion for everybody. She's super fun. She's an amazingly adventurous person, as evidenced by the picture. But this is the real life Patty. She was climbing the Adirondack peaks this winter, trying to climb all of them in sub-freezing conditions with a pickaxe. Everybody needs one. She's also a mom of two strong young women. She's a sibling of lots, a true family person. She is a scientist. She spent a couple of decades at UNC at their Cancer Research Center, and then later transitioned her career into a role as a research manager and PI for the Cordoma Foundation's Biobank. And then from there, her talents have grown to serve other foundations in rare cancer. And we are grateful that she gives time to EHE every day. I want to go through a few housekeeping items before I turn this over to Patty. This is going to be informal, so we want you to jump in. We do ask if you can keep your audio muted unless you're asking a question. That might be helpful. If you're like me, I have things going on around me in my house, so I may go on mute as well. And if you have movement around you or you're moving, maybe turn off your camera so we don't get dizzy. And likewise, I may be doing the same. You can submit questions anytime in the chat box. You can raise your Zoom hand. You can raise your real hand. You can raise all of your hands. And we want to make this an interactive discussion. We do want to remind you that the EHE Foundation does not provide medical advice. The information that we're providing here and in the EHE Community Connections is for information. And as always, we encourage you to talk with your care providers about any questions regarding your care. And now I'm going to turn it over to Patty, and I'll go on mute.
Great, thank you, Denise. And that was a lovely introduction, and speaks to my to my personality. Which, you know, when we were deciding to do this this meeting today, Maida and the folks at EHE asked for, you know, some casual pictures of me, which became all hiking pictures, and then they picked this one. And I was kind of glad they picked this one because I do think it speaks to a lot about all of us. So, you know, what do I think this says about me? I love a challenge, and I'm a very determined person. You know, when I think about you all as EHE patients, you know, you have quite a challenge with just this disease. Just the fact that there's a lack of understanding of the disease, and there's lack of treatments. So, you know, you're on this like incredible journey. But one thing that I think is important for you all to understand is that we, in trying to understand the disease as researchers, we have a lot of challenges as well. We can't study the disease without, you know, reagents to do that. And we have the lack of funding and interest in studying the disease for the first reason, which is we don't have reagents to study it. And the second is just, you know, you have to make people know about it. So, you know, we at EHE are committed to, like, how do we improve this? How can we change this? And power to do that. As Denise mentioned, the beginning of my sort of journey into rare diseases, rare cancers particularly, started with the Cordoma Foundation. And, you know, I'll be honest in that prior to that, all of my research was in sort of better known cancers, if you will. And I actually thought, well, gosh, why would you research a rare cancer? It doesn't affect a lot of people. Well, I've become a complete convert for rare diseases and rare cancers. It's an ignored group of people, and we have to work together to make this, to change this. So I'm very happy to be with the EHE Foundation and this new group of patients, and hopefully together we can make a difference. So Denise, if you go to the first slide, great. So first, let's start with just the simple basics. Like, there's the title of what our biobank is. It's a collection of biospecimens, clinical data to facilitate research. Okay, so what does that mean? So I think one of the first major things that we need to understand is there are specimens, EHE in particular, that are stored all over the country in biobanks, but obviously because it's so rare, there's like one or two at multiple institutions. It becomes a challenge to get any of these tissues released to researchers or sort of anyone. Sort of the only way those might be studied would be if someone at that institution happens to want to work in EHE. And we just discussed why that's probably not happening. So by starting our own biobank, which we did at the very end of 2020, basically started collecting specimens 2021, We now centralize these samples. So basically through that, we become the custodians and we can get them to researchers. This doesn't mean, this means that we can get to researchers all over the country and potentially the world. So now we're taking your precious tissue and getting it to as many people as possible to study it. Our objectives are to build models, mouse models, cell lines. These are the tools that can be used by researchers to help us understand the disease. Through that, we can test drugs, ones that are new in development, ones that are in, are treatments for other cancers that we don't understand, whether they might work in EHE. Sometimes when people say, well, nothing works, but there's no treatments, you think, well, is that it? Are there no treatments because nothing works? Or are there no treatments because it hasn't been studied? And usually that's the latter. It hasn't been studied. And sort of one of the most important things is, in particular with this disease, there's these changes with the EHE in the course of your disease, where it goes from sort of an indolent, we're just watching it and waiting to see, to aggressive. And sometimes that doesn't happen. We need to understand why. Why does somebody sometimes present with a very aggressive disease? Or why does it go from indolent to aggressive? Or why does it stay particularly as indolent? All of these things we have the power, we as patients, you as patients, I should say, have the power to improve, because none of this can be done without your tissue. So I like to say, patients are the center of advancing research in these rare diseases. It cannot be done without you. Next slide, Denise. Okay, so now we're going to go a little bit backwards and just talk about, like, what are these things? So biospecimens, we talk about that. We talk about it on the website and lots of our materials. So that's your tissue from surgery, perhaps the blood, saliva, fluids for people who have fluid buildup either in their lung or their abdomen, and any derivatives of these specimens that we collect. The informed consent, that's what allows us to be your spokesperson, to kind of be able to get access to your tissue. It is your voluntary permission to participate. You then understand that you're not giving up any rights, and that we will protect your rights, but you can also revoke the consent at any time. When we talk about patient information, that's your identified information. In the medical world, they call that your PHI, protected human information, I believe is the middle word. Yeah, so basically we want you to understand that that is all like held in a very protected form. I am the honest broker for that information, and very few people actually see that information relative to your tissue specimen that comes in. So all of our specimens are de-identified when your tissue enters sort of the research realm, and you become bioparticipant number 14123, and that is all anyone in the research world will ever know. We can link that back to you because I have that information, but no one else would be able to do that. And the last thing is the the IRB, which is referred to as well, which is the Independent Review Board. That provides, it's like our police, right? So they provide information for us to make sure that we are following the ethic regulatory standards to protect your rights. They kind of keep us in line. So that kind of just gives you like the background of what we're talking about in all these biobanking terms. Okay, so here's some frequently asked questions about biobanking. And I could start to go into these, but if there's any questions in the audience about, I'd rather hear what you all have to say. And perhaps some of you, maybe we could start with, perhaps some of you saw Jenny on the Facebook page with her kit from the biobank, like on her belly as she was about to go into surgery. And if I could sort of ask Jenny if she might want to talk a little bit about her experience, since she did share it on Facebook, I think she might be willing to talk about it here.
Absolutely. Can you guys hear me okay? Awesome. So yeah, this is primarily for the EHE patients on the call, or the caregivers. You know, I've always, and I've posted this a number of times, we actually have researchers interested in EHE. And they can't do their research if they don't have the resources to do so. And those resources is our tissue, our you know, us helping support getting the right tools for them to do the research. So I had opted to have a robotic thoracic surgery, basically a robotic surgery to go in and get some of the tumors out of my lung. And I knew it was EHE. It had never been biopsied before, but most of the time when you have EHE in your liver, it's usually EHE in your lungs. So I had reached out to Patty. I know nothing about biobanking. I've never done this before. My surgery was at the Ohio State University Medical Center, which is a hospital that is known to not necessarily be awesome at sharing tissue. And so I reached out to Patty and let her know I was having the procedure, and that was it. It was that simple. She sent me an email. I signed off on being part of the biobank, and I got an email saying I was going to get a box in the mail. And I did 2 days before my surgery. And all I did was I took that into the hospital with me, and everyone there knew why I had the box, and they knew exactly what to do with the box, which was amazing. And my surgery took about 2 hours. 2 hours later, I heard that they got enough EHE out of my lungs to keep some at Ohio State, send some to the biobank, and we already sent some of it to a researcher from the biobank. So it was probably 20 minutes out of my life to contact Patty to contribute. So absolutely the easiest thing I've done, and it's necessary. In order for us to move research forward, we have to get our biobank moving in the right direction. So thank you, Patty. You made it super easy for me not knowing anything about it. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Jenny, for contributing, because I think it's this is how we start to solve the problem. Jenny's case was a little unusual. Generally, I ship the kit to the hospital, but so she gave you sort of the background on how it works on a patient's end. You know, on my end, as soon as I have assigned consent and have collected some information about who are you having surgery with and all the rest, I do the legwork of talking with the hospital, talking with your surgeon or the nurse or whomever that is the best contact person, getting the kit shipped to them. That was a little unusual. As Jenny said, Ohio State can be a little bit difficult. Not difficult, just, you know, they said it would be better if the patient brought the kit herself. And I said, this patient will likely do that. But in general, we ship the kit to the hospital. They have it on hand. I check in to make sure everything is set. Everybody knows what they're doing. And it's really of no, you know, there should be very little work on your part to make sure that this is happening. A couple of things about the tissue itself. The hospital, as a first priority, always will save tissue for diagnostic purposes for your treatment and care. Any tissue that's sent to the biobank is tissue that is generally discarded. And when I say that, I mean it is actually thrown out. They only have the means. In some larger institutions, they have a biobank there, which is why I talk about like some tissues being stored in biobanks all over. If they have a biobank and they would like to store some of this tissue there, that would come second. And if there are researchers at the institution, we would never take tissue away from an institution that is doing EHE research. They will take what they need and they'll share back the rest with us. So, you know, we are getting tissue that, you know, could be put to good use. And as I said in the beginning, one of the advantages we have is that we can distribute it to everyone. And I think that's also important in the sense of, as we distribute it to everyone, and Jenny mentioned, you know, we are doing that on a regular basis for every sample that we receive as it comes in. We're not waiting until we amass a large number of samples. We need data now. We need research done now. So, you know, you get a sample, it goes out. When the data, and we, you know, we ask the people that we distribute the tissue to return the data to us so that we can collectively understand what's going on. When the data comes back from 4 institutions, I mentioned that de-identified number. Well, they're all sending the data back with that same number. So in this way, we can be sure that on your particular sample, 5 different people might return data. We know all of that's been done on the same sample. This collective data will really help to advance the research in EHE, specifically in like your particular case. So let's see. And has Janice no questions? Because I can't really see everybody. I don't know why, but I must have it on a weird view.
I saw that Diana unmuted. I wasn't sure if Diana has a question. She has her hand up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes,
I can.
absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you. I have a new tumor in my liver. I appreciate Jenny stating that they didn't biopsy your lung because I didn't know if I needed another biopsy. How big of a tumor does it need to be in order to be useful for the biobank? My currently is like 1.5 centimeter by 1.5.
So thank you, Diana, for first of all, for thinking about whether you could donate. We can take a very small amount, because basically the larger the sample that comes to the biobank, the better. That's the first thing. But as it comes in, we make the decision, okay, there's only this amount of tissue. We will, these are the things that we can do with it. So we have like an order of operation, if you will, for what we can do. The larger samples, we do everything. And as it goes down in amounts, we will preserve it. We will do, the various things that are at the top of the list. But it's very rare that there wouldn't be enough to share. And let me also say, the institution will know if there's not enough to share. So while it's work for us, it should be very little work for you. It would be work on our end that there are times that we don't end up getting any tissue because there's not enough to share. It's still worth trying.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Diana, just from my perspective, I had I think 4 or 5 tumors removed, but they were all, anywhere from 3 millimeters to 5 millimeters. They were small, but because I had a couple. And the nice thing is when they were in there, my doctor was able to see a couple of really small lesions that didn't show up on my CT scan. So he was able to grab those too, which allowed us to have enough to contribute to the biobank. So yeah, I think even, and I didn't know necessarily if we would get enough or not, but just trying is worth it. Absolutely. And I'm really sorry to hear you just had another one show up.
So let's go through a couple questions and then maybe we'll have some additional questions. So, can I call my doctor to get my tissue to the biobank? So that's a question that I think a lot of people are maybe a little bit confused about, like, well, I'm going to tell my doctor I want to contribute and then the tissue will just go to you. Really the first step, and I think it's great when you tell your doctor, because then they're prepared that we will be contacting them. But the only way we can get tissue to the biobank is with a signed consent. And prospective tissue, meaning tissue that's happening at the time of surgery versus after you've had surgery and it's potentially stored at a hospital is much more useful. So we highly encourage anyone who's having surgery and would like to donate to do it ahead of time. So it's good to let your doctor know. And the second question of, do I have to tell my doctor? I think you don't have to. I can do all of that, but if you want to, I think it's always a good lead in. They're prepared for us to contact them. But you absolutely have to sign a consent for any of this to happen.
Patty?
So then, yes.
Oh, I just wanted to clarify, because there are lots of consents, you know, when you going for surgery at a hospital, they want you to sign consent, but that consent doesn't give consent for this. It is specifically the EHE consent form with you that has to be signed, right?
And I'm also happy to say that we have been able to streamline sending the consent because we are doing that through DocuSign. And I would imagine some of you have done DocuSign for, you know, other banking and, you know, those kinds of things is generally what I've been doing it for. But it makes it so simple because you can sign that anywhere and it's directly sent back to us. So rather than printing the consent, signing the consent, scanning it and sending it back, which was kind of, you know, a few years ago was what we were, other biobanks were, I was doing with other biobanks. This makes it incredibly simple. In 5 minutes, you're done. So we do try and make the process very, very simple. Even if you're like, you know, not at your home, you should be able to do this if you've already gone to, you know, wherever you're having surgery, for example. It's very easy to get that done. To the next question, I think it looks like somebody put something in chat, but I can't see that on my screen. We'll go to the next question. Maybe you can look at that, Denise. So we've heard many hospitals will not let you donate to a biobank. You know, while this is true, here's a really important fact that I'm like really believing is our power. When I work with hospitals, even hospitals that are known to be difficult for this in that way, I really push that it is the right of the patient at the time of surgery to direct their tissue to wherever they want if they have the proper documentation. So now we're back to our consent. With our consent, you are telling your hospital you want this to happen at the time of surgery. And honestly, the hospital does not own your tissue until it's stored there. So at the time of surgery, they don't own your tissue. And so that is the best time to try and get tissue to where you want it. You own your tissue because it's being removed from your body. And at that time of surgery, they will generally defer to that statement that it's the patient's wish at the time of surgery to donate to the biobank. We've had tremendous success. I don't think we have not had a collection fail for that reason. So I think that's important to know, that even if you might be hearing, oh, they can't get tissue or whatever, that it's really not true. The only times we don't get tissue are if there's not generally enough tissue to share, or the tissue was necrotic, or the viability of the tissue wasn't good enough to send to us. But other than that, it should, you know, we shouldn't have any problems at all. And in terms of shipment, I want to kind of go through this as well, because I think there was a little bit of I've seen a little bit of confusion, or perhaps on the Facebook page with you can't get viable tissue to the hospital. We have had great success because we've really standardized our kit. We know exactly what we're shipping to the hospital. There's a prepaid shipping label back. It's sent in a form that's usable for any hospital, regardless if they have a very large institution or community hospital. It doesn't matter. We make it so that they are just putting the tissue into the reagents we provide in the kit. and shipping it off to our biobank. It's completely foolproof for the hospital. So all of what's come in my hands that I understand, it's been viable tissue that can then be used, and we have complete confidence that we have that systematized and working very well.
Patty, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yep,
We
absolutely.
do have a question in. We have a couple of questions in. So Oliver asks, is it the same procedure for European hospitals? In my case, German-based hospitals. Will they exchange on a global scale?
So this is a difficult thing for us as a biobank, because we would love to collect from every country. Unfortunately, our protocol does not allow us to collect from anywhere outside of the United States at this point. However, one of the things that can be done is we can receive de-identified samples from other countries. So this becomes complicated, so there's a couple of things that we'd like to say about this. If you're outside the US, if you know of a researcher in your country, or if you're in the UK and you could be associated with their biobank, that would be what we would suggest. If you can get your hospital to store the tissue, perhaps we could work with them so that we don't identify your tissue. They wouldn't identify it to us, but we could receive it in a de-identified manner. But in terms of you consenting on our protocol and doing it in this way that I'm describing through the US, unfortunately, that's not possible at this time.
And I was going to say also, possibly for Oliver, we have on the screen the National EHE UK Biobank. You could also feel free to contact them, because the folks at that biobank certainly conduct and collaborate in research with others all across the world and in Europe. And they may be able to point you to a specific center that can better or closely work with them, or a researcher that's working over in Europe. The other question, Maida asked, can you talk about the difference between donating fluids like pleural fluid and donating blood? Is the biobank accepting blood as a donation?
Great question, Maida. So when we talk about blood, mainly that is as a control for some of the research things we're going to be doing. There are research projects going on, none right now specifically for EHE, but there are research projects where you would be looking at the blood specifically. So at this time, we're only collecting blood if you're donating tissue to use as a control. They call that a germline control for your tissue sample. But in the future, we may collect blood for research protocols, but at this time, we don't have any that are going on. So we would need to specifically store the blood in a particular way to know that. And until we know what the protocol is, we can't do that. So at this time, we're only collecting blood as a control. In terms of fluid, we talked about sort of in more advanced disease, patients will have pleural effusion if they have lung tumors, or they may have ascites if it's in their abdomen, or they've got liver tumors. And those fluids, which are being drained in many cases frequently, could be a great resource for research. We have a completely separate kit that will go out for those collections. It can be the fluid could be collected in a clinic, in the hospital setting, or at home. We ship the kit to you generally, or to the hospital or clinic if that's preferable, and the fluid's collected and shipped back to us. as most of you, if any of you who have a pleural or know anything about a fluid collection, that is literally poured down the drain. It's discarded. No one's ever really looking at that, or generally not looking at that. So again, that's a reagent that could be put to use to help to understand not only the basics of EHE, but because it's found, it's become a little a more advanced state of the disease, it could help us to understand what are the changes that happen to create that. So it's a really important reagent, and we can ship as many kits as possible for the drains that you do if we're getting fluid samples that are giving us data. We recently talked with some researchers who are very interested in understanding this particular state of an EHE disease pathway. So that it's very important for us to get the word out that we are collecting, and this could be a very important reagent for us. Okay, and there's any other questions, Denise? No.
No other questions at this moment, no.
Okay. I think this, so I think I've really gone over like tissue from my hospital to the bio. How do we get that? I think I've sort of discussed that. But I think this is a point I have not made yet. Does donating affect my surgery, my care, or my hospital costs? The answer to all of those is absolutely not. There's in no way will it affect anything relative to your care. And as I mentioned, the first, whatever they need for your diagnostic purposes and what they will store at your hospital comes first. And then anything that's distributed is after that. There's the hospital, there's no cost to you, there's no cost to the hospital, there's no insurance filed relative to this. All of what's it required cost-wise for this collection is funded directly by the EHE Foundation. So you don't need to worry about any of it. None of it's going to show up anywhere that you are a biobank donor. That is all very protected. And once your tissue has left the hospital and comes to us, that's that's sort of the end of that. So the next question, will I get any results on my tissue? So we have recently, we're working hard to be able to give you back as much information as possible in what's allowed by our IRB review board that I mentioned. So one of the things we were able to do recently was amend our protocol to allow us to return data to your surgeon or whoever is your treating physician if we find that you actually do not, that we're getting data back that says you do not have EHE. So if what we're finding is going to affect your diagnosis and potential treatment, we are now allowed to return that to your physician. That's really an important thing since so many EHE cases are actually misdiagnosed. So we will be able to do that. If we find that it's something else, we can let them know that, or we believe it's something else. We will let them know that. But if we find that we do not believe it's EHE, it's important that they understand that so that will help in your treatment. It's one of the things to note though is this is a research setting, and we are just reporting back what we find, which I think is important. In terms of any results that actually come out from researchers on your tissue, well, we won't be able to release that directly to you as in your tissue showed this. We will be able to collectively release patients with similar profile to your tissue. These are the data that we're finding in a research setting. Again, it's with the understanding that this may be on a cell line or in a mouse model. So it's not in a human per se. And we can't guarantee that what's seen in these this research setting is going to be, what you'll see in your case or in other human cases, but at least it's indicative of something that could possibly work. I think the field is trying to move toward getting data released to patients because it's so important. But this is where we are right now, and we will do our best to make sure that that collectively data is returned to patients as quickly as possible, so that it might help in any treatment for your EHE.
Patty, we have another question in, and with that, I'm going to move to the next page here too, because it prompts that.
Okay.
The question is, can donations be made after a patient has passed?
Okay, so that's the last bullet on this slide. We like to call that a legacy donation. Basically, what can we do at that point? We would need to have something set up a little bit in advance to make this happen, but generally what the process is we schedule an autopsy, a partial autopsy, to remove any tissue that's anywhere you see EHE tumors. It's done, sort of like I said, as an autopsy, and it can be scheduled at the hospital that the patient's being treated. We work with the families and the funeral home for the patient to be moved to have this autopsy done, and then we collect really my headphones went off. I've worked with several patients who've done this. I've worked with a couple of EHE patients to try and do this, and one was successful. In a lot of cases, it's the last wish of the patient to do something for others who are living with EHE to try and change their journey from what they have experienced. It's probably one of the most difficult things that I've had to do with other cancers, particularly the Chordoma Foundation. I did several of these successfully, but we've actually, been able to make models of the disease from these tissues that are really important because they're late stage models, and that's really where we need better treatments. So the answer is yes. We'll work very closely with families that are in those situations, but we do need some advance notice because it's a lot of planning to get that in place and be successful. And I'm happy to talk. Please reach out to me at my email. If you want more information and details on that. I hope that answered your question. Okay, so let's go into some of these ways that you can help. If you're planning or may have a surgery, consider consenting right away. We can consent patients at any time. It's a busy time when you're trying to schedule surgery. You've got so much going on. The sooner that you consent, and because that's really your first step, then we have that in place, and then I would just need date of surgery and the hospital and the surgeon's name, and we take it from there. And your responsibility is done at that point. So it's like I said before, it's really important to get these tissues before they're stored at the institution. It's just a very difficult thing. And the tissue has like sort of the role that the tissue, what we can use the tissue for research wise, is decreased after it's been stored at the institution.
Patty, can I interrupt you? We have a question. And I'll apologize, the lawnmower's going in my neighbor's yard if you can hear that too. Janice asked, my daughter had surgery in December 21, not expecting to find cancer. So there is tissue. Also had a liver biopsy in December 21. Can her tissue sample be used? They're saying it's angiosarcoma in lung and EHE in the liver.
Okay, interesting. Yes, it can be used. And I'd be happy to talk with you about, you know, getting a consent sign to make that go forward. The way that works is we would contact the hospital to see if they would share tissue with us once we have a consent. And that's kind of how, you know, that's basically how these retrospective cases would go. Yes, I'd be happy to talk with you and work through that process and determine whether there's enough tissue at the institution to share with us. So the second point is, as we talked a little bit about, is the pleural EHE or tumors in your abdomen that cause fluid. How do we go about that? So again, consent at any time. We have that consent in place, and then we're ready to go. And then if there are fluid draws that are going on, we work with you to just make sure it's as simple as possible to get the fluid collected and then back to us. And we are immediately in those cases getting that to researchers to begin studying it and attempting to make models of the disease to better study EHE. So yes, please reach out to us as quickly as possible if you are having fluid draws. The next item I think is just, it's like huge. It's how we build community. It's how we work together. Be a research advocate. Share what you know. You know, I see on the Facebook page, you know, lots of new people every day coming in who have EHE. They're going to have a tumor resected. They're going to have fluid drained, all of those things. You know, if you are comfortable saying to them, you know, I went to this webinar on the Biobank, and, you know, we really need to work together if we're going to, you know, advance research in EHE. I mean, you know, well, it may not help you immediately. It is the only way to make it better as we go along. I mean, it truly, we can't stress that enough. And the fact that patients have the power. You know, like in the beginning of that, in the write-up that Denise did on the website, you didn't choose to have this cancer. You know, this was obviously not anyone's choice. Where your power is what you do now. You have the power to advance research in this disease, period. And honestly, you're the only ones that have the power. We need to be advocates, you as patients, we as researchers within the foundation, to make it a better situation for EHE, to increase funding. On our end, we've got to, you know, bring awareness to the disease at the NIH, at the National Cancer Institute, to fund do more funding in rare diseases. But, you know, the first step of that is to have researchers to have some preliminary data or want to work in EHE. And for that, we need your tissue. So it's so circular, and, you know, it's really, it can be incredibly powerful. To give the example of the Chordoma Foundation, you know, I think many of you may know that the EHE Foundation is recently funded through the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Rare as One. You know, it's an initiative that's funding rare diseases to try and get us. How do you implement some funds to catapult research in these rare diseases? And EHE has been funded for the past 2 years through Chan Zuckerberg, and we just came back from a conference there in San Diego, which was really empowering and wonderful. But one of the things that happened was Josh Summer, who's the executive director at the Chordoma Foundation, which is another rare sarcoma, and my first job in rare cancers, and he spoke, And what was most inspiring was he was exactly where we are a few years when I started. He had no models of the disease, very few people researching it. And we built the biobank, we built models of the disease, we enabled drugs to be tested in these models, which enabled clinical trials, and they now have 9 clinical trials that are going on in chordoma. And I mean, that to me, first of all, it was exciting to have been a part of that. And it actually prompted me to realize I needed to help more rare cancers. But I mean, it's the proof. It's the proof that it can be done. Chordoma is as rare as EHE. And it took a while to build the biobank and build the community. But in the end, it was the proof that together they've been successful, and so can we. Is there any other questions, Denise?
Yeah, I was just gonna say we're approaching the top of the hour, and I was just gonna put out a call for any last minute questions. You're welcome to just come off mute, raise your hand, whatever works for you. Comments, anything? Janice did put in the chat to contact her, so we've made a note of that. Thank you, Janice.
And I do think, yeah, that please reach out to me at any time if you have questions that are more specific to your case, or someone, if you're a caregiver, your family member's case, because I think, we can talk through things and decide if we, is this something that makes sense to try in terms of, like we had the one question about previous tissue, et cetera. We are here for you. We want to build community, and we need to build community to be successful.
Anything else from anyone? You're getting lots of thanks there and contacts. Diana has her hand raised.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to say thank you personally. I mean, I realized that there wasn't a lot of people on this call, but I think the people on the call really needed this information, and I want to thank you so much for putting it on. I personally, I've been approved for the ultrasound sonic study, but I think at this point in time, even though that's a very altruistic thing to do, I think they don't have to be EHE patients. I think donating my tissue is more important, and I've been in contact with the local surgeon, and we'll be getting in contact with you, Patty. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Diana. We really appreciate that. And, take what you've learned, to everyone who took the time to be on this call, take what you learn and share it, because I do think one of the things that's been, it's a challenge to get the information to people. We are up and rolling. We've had, I think the number is 47 patients in contact with us. We've got consents from a good number, and we've collected a good number of samples already. And this has all been during COVID, right? Let's remember, we started this biobank during COVID. So, there's always bumps. We have navigated the bumps. We are ready. We want to fly. That's what we want to do. We want to, make the progress that the Chordoma Foundation has made. We want people to be talking about us in the next 5 years. We want to make that much progress that people will be talking about us.
Okay, thank you. Up, looks like we might have one more. Maida says, do any patients on this call have ideas on how to spread the word on the urgency and critical need for tissue donation? If you have ideas, and if you don't have them today, and certainly always reach out. But if you have any ideas or things that we can do, please let us know. All right.
Great.
Nothing. Okay. Well, thanks everybody who joined. We really, really appreciate your making the time. And Oliver, I think you're the one who's in the afternoon already, perhaps. We appreciate everybody taking the time to come on the call, and we hope that this was helpful. Again, as Patty said, share what you know. If you have ideas to keep keep watch of social media for EHE Foundation for upcoming community connections. But if you have ideas of topics that you would like to have discussed or you think other patients would benefit from too, or have interest, certainly reach out at any time through the foundation or to anyone that you're in contact with and let us know. We'd love to bring those to light. And I think that is it, unless anybody has anything else. Thank you, Patty. Thanks for giving us part of your Saturday.
You're welcome. Thanks everybody for coming. And like I said, reach out with any questions. I'd be happy to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Be well, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.